Have you ever asked yourself why some prayers seem to get a no from God? We've all been there, haven't we? Down on our knees, praying with all our might, and yet the answer we receive isn't the one we had hoped for. It's a no instead of a yes, a closed door instead of an opened one. It's a confusing and disappointing moment that can leave us questioning everything. Take a moment to remember the Apostle Paul, a man of great faith, who also faced such a moment. In the second letter to the Corinthians, Paul spoke of a thorn in his flesh, a metaphorical representation of an affliction he was struggling with. Despite his fervent prayers, God's response was not as he had expected. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, Paul wrote, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul prayed for relief, but God said no. Yet this wasn't a denial of Paul's faith or a refusal of his request out of spite. Quite the opposite. It was a redirection. God's no redirected Paul's focus from his own strength to the strength of God. It made him realize that in his weakness, God's power was made perfect. This no wasn't a rejection. Rather, it was an opportunity for Paul to understand that God's grace was sufficient for him, even in the midst of his afflictions. In our own lives, when we face that tough no from God, it can be hard to see the silver lining. But remember, God's no is not a rejection, but a redirection. It's a loving nudge to guide us towards his greater plan for us. A plan that is often beyond our understanding, but always for our good. So the next time you find yourself questioning that no, remember Paul's story. Remember that there's a reason behind every no, a reason that contributes to your greater good. God's no is not a rejection, but a redirection. Why would a loving God allow pain and suffering? A question that echoes in the halls of our hearts, a question as old as time itself. Yet, in the grand tapestry of life, there's a profound purpose to pain, a divine design, often hidden in our trials and tribulations. Consider the tale of Job, a man of unwavering faith, who was stripped of everything he held dear. Job lost his children, his wealth, his health, all in a swift stroke of calamity. Yet, in the face of unimaginable suffering, Job fell to his knees and worshipped, uttering the words, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. It's a narrative that challenges our understanding of pain, doesn't it? We often view our hardships as hurdles, barricades that hinder us. But what if we shifted our perspective? What if, like Job, we saw our suffering not as a roadblock, but a road, a path towards growth and transformation? See, pain has this uncanny ability to peel away our superficial layers, to expose our core, to reveal our true selves. It's in our moments of deepest despair that our true character is sculpted, our faith refined. It's through the crucible of trials that we are molded into vessels of honor, vessels fit for the Master's use. Yes, pain is a teacher, a sculptor, a guide. It leads us to valleys we might never venture into, peaks we might never scale, depths we might never explore. It pushes us to the brink, stretching us, growing us, transforming us until we emerge stronger, wiser, more resilient. Pain is not a punishment, my friends. It's an invitation to lean into the discomfort, to embrace the uncertainty, to trust the process. It's a platform, a stage set for the grand display of God's glory. It's a testament to his sovereign power, his boundless love, his infinite wisdom. It's a reminder that he works all things for good, even our pain, and especially our pain. So let's not shun our suffering, let's not fear our trials. Let's accept them, let's grow through them, let's transform because of them. Because remember, pain is not a punishment, but a platform for God's glory. How do we keep faith when God's answer is no? That's the question we have to grapple with, isn't it? The answer lies in the power of perseverance. Consider the story of Abraham, a man of great faith, who waited patiently for the promise of a son. As the good book tells us in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 15, and thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. Now Abraham didn't receive this promise in the blink of an eye. No. It took him years, decades even, to see God's promise fulfilled. Abraham's story teaches us that perseverance in faith isn't just about waiting around, it's about actively trusting in God's timing, even when it doesn't line up with our own. You see, our time is limited, but God's time is perfect. It's never too early, never too late, but always right on time. When God says no, it's easy to feel discouraged, it's easy to question his plan. But remember, friends, God's no is not a rejection, but rather a redirection. It's his way of saying, "Not yet, my child, I have something better in store for you." So how do we persevere in faith? We do so by following Abraham's example. We hold on to God's promise, knowing that He is faithful to fulfill it. We remain patient, understanding that His timing is perfect. And above all, we keep moving forward, trusting in His plan for our lives. Perseverance and faith is not a passive act. It's an active journey. It's a journey of hope, of trust, and of unwavering faith in God's promise. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how long the wait or how great the obstacle. So when God says no, don't lose heart. Instead, let it fuel your perseverance. Let it strengthen your faith. Let it remind you that God's timing is perfect and His promises are sure. Perseverance is not about waiting for God to move, but moving with God in faith. Remember, my friends, we serve a God who keeps His promises. We serve a God whose timing is perfect, and we serve a God who turns our trials into triumphs. So, let's keep moving forward with perseverance and faith. Opening, what happens when God's no feels like a loss? Imagine for a moment that you're standing among a crowd of 5,000, hungry, tired, and far from home. You followed a man named Jesus into the wilderness, captivated by His teaching and His healing. But as the shadows lengthen, your stomach growls. How will you be fed in this desolate place? And then you see it. Just a small boy offering his lunch, 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. It seems like a drop in the ocean, an insignificant offering in the face of such vast need. But then Jesus lifts His eyes to heaven, gives thanks, and breaks the bread. Suddenly there's plenty, more than enough to go around. Not just a few scraps, but 12 baskets full of leftovers. It's a miracle, yes, but it's also a lesson about God's provision. Often it comes in unexpected ways from unlikely sources, and in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Just like the feeding of the 5,000, God's no to our plans is not a denial of provision, but a redirection. It's a shift in perspective, a call to trust in His abundance rather than our scarcity. It's a reminder that our God is a God of multiplication who can take our little and make it much. When God says no, it's not because He wants to withhold good things from us. It's because He wants to give us something better, something that aligns with His will and His purpose. It's because He sees the bigger picture, the grand tapestry of our lives, and knows exactly what we need and when we need it. So when God's no feels like a loss, remember the 5,000, remember the loaves and the fish, remember that His provision is not about fulfilling our wants, but fulfilling His will. Closing. God's provision is not about fulfilling our wants, but fulfilling His will. Opening, how can we find peace when God says no? In the grand tapestry of life, there are moments when we are faced with the echoing silence of a divine no. It's in these moments we are called to surrender, to relinquish our desires and align ourselves with the will of God. This is not an easy task, my friends. It requires strength, courage, and yes, a profound sense of peace. Let's take a moment to remember Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. It was the night before His crucifixion, a time of deep anguish and uncertainty. He prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. Be done." Luke 22:42, ESV. Here, Christ shows us the ultimate example of surrender. In His darkest hour, He chose to submit to the will of the Father. He chose to embrace the no, to find peace amidst the storm. But what does this mean for us today? How can we apply this lesson in our own lives? Surrendering to God's will does not mean giving up or admitting defeat. Rather, it's a conscious choice to trust in His divine plan. It's acknowledging that His wisdom is infinite, beyond our limited understanding. It's choosing to believe that even when He says no, it's for our ultimate good. When we surrender our desires, our dreams, our hopes to God, we open ourselves to His divine guidance. We allow Him to lead us down paths we may not have chosen, but are ultimately for our benefit. In surrender, there is freedom. Freedom from the anxiety of control, the burden of expectation. In surrender, we find peace. Not the kind of peace that the world offers, but a peace that transcends all understanding. A peace that is steadfast in the face of trials, unshakable in the midst of storms. A peace that comes from resting in the assurance of God's unfailing love and faithfulness. Closing. Peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of God. As we surrender to His will, let us remember that His no is not a rejection, but a redirection. A call to trust, to hope, and to find peace in His perfect plan. Opening. Can a no from God lead to victory? Let's ponder this question for a moment. It's easy to feel defeated when we face hardships, especially when we feel like we're hearing a no from God. But Scripture tells us a different story. Consider Joseph, a young man who was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was wrongfully accused, thrown into prison, and seemingly forgotten. But that was not the end of his story. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph says to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." What an incredible perspective. Joseph was able to see that his trials were not pointless suffering, but rather, they were part of a purposeful plan. God used his trials to bring about a great triumph, not just for Joseph, but for an entire nation. Similarly, when we face trials, it's not because God is against us, but because he is for us. He is working all things together for our good, even when we can't see it. Each no we encounter is not a denial of our desires, but a redirection towards his greater plan. God uses our sufferings to shape us, to refine us, and to prepare us for the triumph that is to come. Our trials are not roadblocks, but stepping stones towards victory. We may not understand why we are going through what we are going through, but we can trust that God is in control and that he has a plan. When we face a no from God, let's remember Joseph. Let's remember that God turns our trials into triumphs. Let's remember that with God, even a no can lead to victory. So, let's embrace our trials not with fear or frustration, but with faith. Let's press on, not in our own strength, but in the strength that Christ provides. Closing. Triumph is not about avoiding trials, but overcoming them through Christ. So when God says no, what is he really saying? This question has been the driving force behind our discussion today. And through our journey, we've discovered that God's no is not a rejection, but rather a redirection. It may seem like a roadblock, but it's actually a detour leading us to a path that will bring us closer to his divine plan. We've explored the purpose of pain, and we've learned that it's not a punishment, but a platform. Each trial, each hardship is a stage upon which God's glory can be displayed. It's a testament to his power and his grace, a reminder that he can turn our darkest nights into our brightest days. Then we delved into the power of perseverance. It's not about moving against the current, but moving with God. It's about holding on to faith, even when the waters are rough, even when the journey seems impossible. It's about trusting in his strength and his timing, knowing that he will guide us through. We've also touched on the promise of his provision. When God says no, it's because he has something better in store. His no is a fulfillment of his will, a manifestation of his love. It's a reminder that he is a God of abundance, a God who provides not just what we want, but what we need. We then stepped into the peace of surrender. This is the tranquility that comes from being in his presence, from laying our burdens at his feet. It's about letting go and letting God, about trusting in his wisdom and his sovereignty. This peace surpasses all understanding. It's a peace that can only come from him. Lastly, we explored the potential for triumph. When God says no, it's not an end, but a new beginning. It's an opportunity for us to rise, to overcome, and to triumph through Christ who strengthens us. It's a chance for us to become more than conquerors, to become vessels of his glory. So when we put all these pieces together, we see that when God says no, he's not closing a door, but opening a window. He's not stripping us of our dreams, but giving us a vision. He's not denying us of our desires, but refining our hearts. So to put it simply, when God says no, he's not saying, I don't care, or you're not worthy. No. Instead, he's saying, trust me, I have something better in store. His no is an invitation for us to lean into his love, to trust in his timing, and to rest in his promises. And so we conclude with this thought. When God says no, he's saying, trust me, I have something better in store.